Alrighty, hello peeps, and welcome to my new shiny comprehensive guide on setting yourself up with a homemade version of a TrackIR system. I'm making this vid pretty much as a direct response to a very short guide I made a few weeks ago. I found this software called FreeTrack. I got really excited about it because it works and made a quick guide. I've had loads of feedback, loads of responses, loads of questions, both on YouTube and on the DayZ forums, which I frequent daily. Loads of PMs about it, asking me, you know, does it actually work? Are you trolling? Are you trolling me, Fraggle? No, I'm not. It basically just works really well. And I've recommended it to a few friends as well. And I always get the same response. They're always like, no, but it's just, I've heard about it. No, it doesn't work. I'm just going to get myself a TrackIR. Frankly, it's bollocks. It does work. It works really well. It works flawlessly. I've actually, since I've discovered FreeTrack, I had a mate come round he's been using TrackIR for about 5 years now, and he used my setup on my computer, and he basically said there's no difference. It just works as well. The only reason I can think that people don't go for things like FreeTrack, it must be the fact it's free. When something's free, people get suspicious. That's what I'm assuming anyway. They assume it's just not as good, or there's a catch. You know, a lot of free on the internet doesn't always mean free. Sadly, it can be free to install, and then you start getting you know, messages popping up saying, no, to unlock this feature you need to click this or pay a monthly subscription and all that bollocks. With FreeTrack, it's literally free. It's released under general public license. You're not going to get charged at any point. It's free software. Now, the software is free. The hardware is something you have to take care of yourself. There's quite a few different ways of going about that. It's very inexpensive. I've been messing around with lots of different builds at home, and I've basically realised most people have some, if not all of the parts, just knocking around the house anyway. You just need some LEDs, a webcam, and you're good to go pretty much. I'll go into that in a lot more detail later on in the guide, basically showing you how to build your own, and if you don't have the parts, where you can source them from. Now, I took a quick spin over to the TrackIR website because my friend's always raving about it, and he was saying, no, it can't compare to TrackIR. TrackIR's got this 6 degrees of freedom thing going on. So lo and behold, on the front page of the TrackIR website, their tagline is this: true 6 degrees of freedom support is one of the main things that puts TrackIR well ahead of any other input device. Well, that's wrong, because if you use FreeTrack, that also offers 6 degrees of freedom. You can see it down there. It's literally exactly the same thing. 6 degrees of freedom, basically, it corresponds to your movement within 3D space. The first 3 degrees of freedom are your head rotation, such as pitch, yaw and roll. That's your head rotating around a single point, basically the base of your neck. And the 3 other movements are the XYZ movement of your head in space, which is, you know, leaning forward, leaning left, leaning right. FreeTrack supports all that, and it supports it really well. So if that's TrackIR's main thing, putting it ahead of other input, you know, ahead of any other input device, it's not very far ahead in my opinion. Now, I'm not knocking TrackIR. People rate it really highly, and they rate it with good reason. It works very well. It's got a good track record, no pun intended, and people love it and have done for years. So, you know, I don't want this video to be about why TrackIR's crap. It's not crap, and if you've got the money, which, you know, it can be between $100, $170 up to for the pro version, I think. If you've got the money and you don't want a faff, then go and buy one. It will work flawlessly for you. This is just to offer an alternative to that, basically. To dispel just another myth though, because there's a couple, and I've seen some big YouTubers that really should know a little bit better, basically singing the praises of TrackIR, and when anyone ever mentions a free version, they say no, TrackIR tracks at 120 frames per second, blah blah blah. Well, so does FreeTrack. That's just a fact. FreeTrack will convert your movement and display that in game at 120 frames per second if your monitor obviously supports that refresh rate, and if your rig can support that. So that's another myth that people just assume that TrackIR and only TrackIR supports. Now, I've been thinking about it, and TrackIR really doesn't have much competition, if any, and I'm not really sure why, because you've got companies like Logitech, etc., that offer loads of peripherals for PC gaming, etc., and to my knowledge, I don't think there's any kind of decent competition for them, which might explain the $170 price tag, just saying. The price of setting yourself up with a free track system is either free if you already have some of the gear you have laying around the house, which for the very basic version you just need one LED which you can have on a keyring. That will get it working. To get it working with the 6 degrees of freedom to emulate the actual TrackIR, you need three points of reference, so that means you need 3 LEDs or 3 points of reflective surfaces on your headgear, which can be a cap or your headphones. So that's just to dispel a couple of myths and people being a bit cynical about something being free and thus not working. It does work, it is free, and you just need to put a little bit of effort into building it to start with. Once you've done that, you're set up and you're good to go. Also, building something yourself is just a pretty good laugh, to be honest, and I know it appeals to a lot of people due to some of the feedback I've had on the forums, YouTube, etc. And on the free track forums. If you head over there, you can see all these crazy builds people make. I mean, it doesn't have to look silly. Some people make them look silly on purpose, but you can actually make a very sleek, basically replica of a TrackIR system yourself. And if you don't want to build something like that yourself, you can actually just go over to TrackIR website, buy yourself one of their cap clips for about $10 from TrackIR themselves, and clip that onto your cap. Use that with the free track software. Bob's your uncle, you're good to go. You're tracking your head movement in game. Right, so the first and easiest way of getting set up is to use a 1-point tracking system. Now, to do this, you just need a webcam. All the builds need a webcam, by the way. That's what's going to track your movement. Can't remember if I said that up front, so sorry if I misled you a little bit. But as an example, I'm using this webcam here. It cost me $6 from eBay. So I mean, that's peanuts, really. If if you're running games that use TrackIR and you've got a decent rig, I'm guessing $6 won't be too much of a stretch for most people. If you're too young and don't have your own money, go and nick your dad's. He's probably got one, even if he keeps it hidden in a drawer. So you'll need an LED. Now this is important because the first few systems, the first few ways of doing it, require an LED of some description. Now, I've been rummaging through the house and I've got myself about 25 LEDs that I've taken out of remote controls, old phones. There was one in a food processor. I mean, everything uses LEDs nowadays because, well, there's lots of reasons. I won't go into too much detail, but an LED is basically a light emitting diode. They're very cheap. You can buy bags of them online for like $5. So again, if you can't find it lying around in your house, get yourself onto eBay. You can buy tons of things at a very cheap price. The reason people technology companies like LEDs is because unlike traditional light bulbs, they don't have a filament in them. That's a big draw, so they're not very fragile. They're very simple. It's literally the current passing through the LED. I won't bore you with it. It excites the electrons, and then when the electrons get excited, they give off photons, and that's what we see as light. To do any of these builds, you don't need to know a lot about electronics. It's basically making a simple circuit, and I'll show a few diagrams later on. Now, for the 1-point system, it is literally as simple, and this is what I did to start with, as sellotaping a keyring with an LED on it to the top of your head, or ideally to the top of your headphones or cap. That will be enough to get yourself tracking your head movement in the game. You'll need to calibrate the software so that it's picking up on that light correctly, but essentially that is it. 1 point stuck to your head, the camera tracks that point, you're good to go. As a quick note, I would say, now if you've got an LED keyring as an example, the LED might be housed within that keyring so that you just see the end of the LED. Now that's not ideal for tracking, because when you turn your head to the side, too far, or up and down, then it's going to lose the light because it can't see it directly. Now, to use something like Free Track or TrackIR, you don't have to turn your head too much, but it still needs to be able to see about a 40-degree movement each way if you're turning your head around. So with my keyring, for example, I just took the LED out of the housing itself, just literally ripped it apart, and then you've got the switch, you've got the exposed LED. I sellotape that to my headphones, and you're good to go. That's it. That's your single point setup. You can do it if you've got everything already sitting there. Do it in 5 or 10 minutes and try it out. The the gameplay here, actually, that's using a 1-point system. Now you can see it's using, it's got 3 degrees of freedom, so that's because it's only got 1 point of reference. It's showing my head rotation. So in this game, Armour, for example, Armour 3, that's the equivalent of using free look. I'm looking around, I'm looking up, left, down, right, and so on and so forth, and it's tracking that naturally. What it doesn't support with the 1-point system is the 6 degrees of freedom, which completely tracks your head in 3D space. So with a 1-point clip, the downside is that it won't support leaning, so leaning left to right, leaning forward and backwards and so on. It can't do that when it's only got 1 point to track. Which brings us to the next way of doing it, which is the 3-point cap clip. Now you can either make the clip and clip it to your cap, or you can actually build it onto your cap or headphones. There's 2 ways that FreeTrack will recognise it, and again it's the same as TrackIR. You can either have the cap system, which involves 2 LEDs on the peak of the cap and 1 on top, or you can use a clip, a side clip, which clips onto the side of your headphones. I haven't tried the side clip, but it's a very popular way of doing it. A lot of people use it that way. I just prefer having it on top of my head. I don't like it sticking out to the side, that's just me. Now again, it involves exactly the same principle. You've got 3 points of reference lit up, your 3 LEDs. Now the camera will pick up on those 3 LEDs and translate that movement into rotation and XYZ movement. Now there is another way of doing exactly the same thing but using reflective tape and IR light, or just IR LEDs, infrared LEDs themselves, and I'll go into the infrared stuff at the end because it's slightly different, but possibly the most elegant way of doing it, so I will go into that after these 3 basic setups. Now if you're using 3 LEDs on your cap, headphones, on a clip, then you're going to need to do some very basic wiring. I mean, LEDs are about as basic as it gets when it comes to wiring. I know nothing about electronics and I managed to do it. I haven't set my head on fire. I mean, you're dealing with tiny amounts of electricity, you know. I mean, you probably tried it, sticking a battery on your tongue. I mean, it's not going to kill you. You really can't go too wrong. There is loads of great guides online. I'm going to kind of brush over it because electronics is not my strong point. I'm not going to make a deep electronic circuitry guide. I literally had a positive wire and a negative wire coming from a little battery, and an LED has a positive and a negative piece of wire coming out of it. The positive side, if you need to identify it, generally is either the longest bit of the wire, although that doesn't always apply, but if you look inside the LED close up, there's a smaller, I don't know what to call it, it's not a filament, the smaller part of metal inside the LED is the positive side, the larger part is the negative. So if you're wiring it up to a wire, I just use a household cable from an electric food mixer, then you need to know which side is positive and negative. It's the small bit of metal connected to that wire, that's the positive side. Now you can do like a basic series circuit, a 3 LED series circuit, and just have it going from one into the positive, out of the negative, then onto the next one, and so on and so forth. Now if you've got a 6-volt power supply and you've got 3 1.5 volt LEDs, obviously they're going to use 4.5 volts, which means you're actually putting in too much power. Now LEDs are very forgiving, they're extremely forgiving. I haven't used a resistor in any of my setups so far and I've had no problems. Now if you're putting too much current through the LEDs, I think you can shorten the life of them. I don't know how much by, mine hasn't given up on me yet. If you did want to make it a bit more professional, then you could use a resistor in that setup. Again, there's loads of good guides. There's a LED wizard actually on the actual FreeTrack website itself to do calculations. So if you wanted to pop a little resistor into that setup to control the current, then you can calculate which type of resistor you need. It can get quite complex, that side of things, but it's essentially very simple. For example, with 3 1.5 volt LEDs, using a 6-volt power supply, you'd need a 15 ohm resistor. That's a simple calculation you can make on using various conversion calculators and so on different sites. It's a really good site called Instructables actually, I've been looking through, and they'll teach you how to build anything in the world you can ever imagine. Even if you're not interested in making a TrackIR, You should get over there and have a look. It's just some truly great stuff over there. Now there is also a 4-point setup you can use with FreeTrack. I haven't tried it yet. It basically involves adding one more LED to the chain of LEDs and then using that as a 4th reference point. There's a couple of pros and cons to doing it, nothing major. It's a case of preference really. The fundamental differences are between the 1-point and the 3-point, which I've explained before. Okay, so that explains your basic setups, what you need to know to get going with FreeTrack. There's another way of doing it, and in my opinion, probably more elegant. It's more in line with the way TrackIR go about it. You don't need to know a great deal more, and it's something I've started dabbling with, and that involves using infrared light. Now you can get infrared LEDs. I've managed to get some out of remote controls just around my home, so I managed to get 3 of those and do exactly the same as I described before with the 3-point cap setup, but used infrared LEDs instead. Now the advantage of using infrared LEDs is that they don't give off visible light. So for instance, when you've got LEDs on your head, you've literally got 3 bright LEDs sitting on your cap. Now that's not ideal for everyone, so if you use an infrared LED for this system, it's very discreet, and I would say it's more elegant. It's the same technology Wii remotes use and TrackIR uses. Now you follow exactly the same principles I just showed, but you just use the infrared lights. But importantly, you need to then make some adjustments to your webcam for it to pick up on that IR light clearly. Now all webcams have an IR filter within them. That IR filter, it allows the webcam to give a less washed out image, but for the sake of what we're trying to do here, it can actually obviously filter out the IR light that we want the camera to pick up, so it really helps to remove it. I've actually managed to get tracking without removing that filter, but I've since removed it because you get a much clearer defined point of reference for the camera to pick up. Now it's not as hard as it sounds to actually remove that filter. For most web cameras it's a case of undoing 1 or 2 screws, taking it apart. If you look inside behind the lens, there's a small square piece of glass that you can just, with a very fine, either small electrical screwdriver, something, or a needle perhaps, you can just pop it out, take it out. You can put it back later if you decide you want to change your mind. Screw the webcam back together. There you go, you remove the IR filter. It really is as simple as that. That will allow your camera to pick up on IR light much clearer. Now the point of using IR light, I would suggest, is so that you don't have to worry about the ambient light in your room. For instance, if you're using traditional LEDs, then obviously they work better in a darkened room with your curtains shut, because then that allows the camera to pick up the points of light nicely. The beauty of using infrared light is that it's something the human eye can't see, but the camera will now pick up on. So it's irrelevant the lighting levels in your room, as long as you've done these 2 things. I've explained the first one, and that's to remove the IR filter. The second one is to block visible light getting into your camera, because obviously once you've done that, the only light passing into your camera and being picked up on is the infrared light being given off by the infrared LEDs on your setup. Now there's a couple of ways of going about it. You can use old school floppy disks. Apparently if you take those out of the case, cut it to size, place it over the lens, that will actually block out visible daylight but allow IR light through. You can also use unexposed film, which is what I've done, and it works beautifully. I'd suggest using that route, assuming you can get some old unexposed film. Now this step isn't actually necessary, because you can still use it if you darken your room slightly, as with the traditional method, but if you do this last step, then you're literally making a TrackIR, because it'll now work in broad daylight. It's using exactly the same principles as things like Wii remotes, remote controls. It's invisible, but it's there tracking the light. That's how it all works. Now if you follow those steps, you've basically got yourself an infrared webcam that will only pick up an infrared light, which is perfect for this next and final setup, which is using reflective points. Now by using reflective points, you're basically negating the need to use LEDs or any wiring at all. This is by far, in my opinion, the most elegant and useful way you're going to be able to get this thing set up. It's probably the easiest as well. So you've got your infrared camera, you've got that sorted. Now all you need is some reflective points and an IR light source. Now have the IR light source somewhere on your desk, preferably behind the web camera, and then attach some reflective points in the same places you would have had the LEDs. Just attach some reflective tape. It doesn't have to be tape, you can use any reflective material as long as it's suitably reflecting the IR light back into the camera. If you attach that tape at certain points on your headset, the same points like I say that you would have had the LED, that is enough for FreeTrack to now be picking up those points of reference in exactly the same way as TrackIR works with its reflective point caps. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, you could actually just use this system, buy a TrackIR clip for $10, put that on your headset, and that's it, you're up and running. It negates the need for any LEDs, any messing about with wiring, batteries, so on and so forth. It really is that simple. You've got an IR light source on your desk, reflecting IR light source from your setup back into your camera. That's it, that's all you need to know to get up and running. Alright, that really is it. That is the basics that you need to know to get yourself set up with a free or inexpensive version of TrackIR. I hope you found this guide useful and informative. If there's certain things that I brushed over or neglected to mention and you're left with questions unanswered, then please feel free to shoot me a message, leave a comment, and I'll do my best to answer any remaining questions you've got. For now, that is it. Thanks for watching. Frag out.